When we talk hockey, it's brought to you by Common Crown Brewery in Calgary. And Jake McCabe's goal at 1:30 of overtime lifted the Maple Leafs to a 3-2 win over the visiting Pittsburgh Penguins Monday in Toronto. Josh Getzoff called it, and he joins us, the voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And Josh, I'm going to jog your memory in a moment about the last time you joined us, but can you give me your take of that game last night, the 3-2 OT loss, at least a point on the road? How are you taking it? What was the team's takeaway?
Yeah, I think, Rod, and great to be with you again. I think that the overall arcing theme of the game is that you were happy to get a point. I think the Penguins felt like there was a possibility to get two in that game. And honestly, in the first period, they probably should have had more than one goal. I thought they were clearly the better team. To the Leafs' credit, they turned it up a notch in the second period and really took control at certain times. In the beginning of the third, it was all Toronto, leading to that Austin Matthews goal to give them the lead at the time. But Penguins, as they've been during this stretch now where they've earned a point in 9 straight games, they've had that resilience and they've had that persistence in their game and staying with it, which was not always there through the first, really, 70 games of the season, which is crazy to say. But now they've started to find that belief internally. And to their credit, they were able to poke one in with Drew O'Connor late, get that game to overtime. Unfortunate not to be able to get the extra point. But I think when you're looking at the schedule here, all eyes are focused on this showdown against Detroit on Thursday. So getting a point last night to at least keep pace and stay within striking distance is important.
Last time you were on, guys were just about to start that Western road trip. You were in Vancouver, and you said, we're going to find out what this team's all about over this trip. And then loss. I'm like, oh, now they're back and all these points. Have you seen a roller coaster season like that? If this was a movie, nobody would believe it. This is insane, man. For the Penguins.
Yeah, they're in a position, Rod, if they get in, they'd make NHL history. They were the furthest amount of points out with 11 games to go, with I think it was 9 points with 11 games left. If they were to get in, no team has ever done that before. So that kind of puts in perspective just what they're trying to do right here. And you're right. That Western Canada trip, if we remember, it actually started out with an incredible victory in Vancouver. Erik Karlsson scores in overtime. You're thinking, oh man, that's 3 wins in a row. This team's starting to get going in the right direction. That was probably, the bookends of that trip were their 2 toughest games with Vancouver and then Edmonton. And you're looking at it, you're like, okay, Seattle and Calgary, these are winnable games here. Let's see what happens. They lose in Seattle in a game that they honestly probably should have won. Philip Grubauer was very good and shut them out. Then they go to Calgary and they're up 3-1 with 8 minutes to go. And they blow the lead, as they've done a lot of times in frustrating fashion this year. The Flames get a late goal in regulation, which was the extra killer there from Yegor Sharangovich, who, as we know, is having a monster year for Calgary. They get the win. Penguins get thumped the next night in Edmonton. And at that point, I think the decisions were made on Jake Guentzel. The decisions were made on Chad Ruhwedel. And really, this team's chapter had been closed as far as this season was concerned, because it looked like they were just too far out. They couldn't find any kind of rhythm, and they looked like, as a team, that they had kind of lost belief. But something crazy happened when they went to New York and New Jersey early last week, when they were, 7 points out at the time, facing the Rangers back in MSG, and they had a stomach bug running through the team that took out a few guys. They were shorthanded. Guys were playing sick. They go in there and they win. Then the next night, they do something they've only done 4 times in 31 games this year, where they erase a third period deficit in New Jersey and win. And after that, I can tell you from my perspective, just being with the team and then calling the games, there started to be belief, because then you're not looking at 9 points, you're looking at 3 points. And 3 points with 9 games to go is a lot different than 9 points with 6 games to go. So now they're tied. They're tied with Detroit. They're tied with, I believe, the Capitals with that last playoff spot, and they're 2 points back of the Islanders. So the interesting thing about the Penguins is that they finished the season on the island against New York. So that sets up, as the schedule makers tend to sometimes hit a home run, that sets up to be potentially the game of the year in Game 82 for Pittsburgh.
And I don't know what changed. You do. You were there, so I'll ask you. But I was remiss. When you guys came through Sunrise, I didn't come look you up in the press box. That's my bad. But I was at the game, and I could not believe how hard Sidney Crosby was working, because Ovi has taken some nights off this year. Sidney has not. And you said you've been calling games and around the team for almost a decade. Has he just said, no, this isn't going to happen, I'm taking this team into the playoffs? Because he was I never seen him work so hard as he did that night.
Yeah, he's been, I mean, it's an easy word to describe Sidney Crosby because he's been this way his whole career. But this season, and you're right, really in the last month or so in particular, he's been a beast. I mean, he's taken it to a whole different level, and the team has kind of followed his lead. I don't want to say jumped on his back, because there's been a lot of guys that have been a part of this that have contributed in meaningful ways here over this stretch where the team's gotten points in 9 straight games. But Crosby is at the forefront of it, as you would expect if the Penguins are going to make any kind of run. And it's interesting, Rob, because I think when the trade deadline happened, he obviously loses his sidekick and a real staple here in Pittsburgh of Jake Guentzel, who's a Stanley Cup champion, a guy who scored 40 goals, who just had an unbelievable chemistry with Crosby. And they were very close. I mean, when you win together, you build relationships. And Jake's been in the stall next to Sid since he came into the National Hockey League. So when he was traded away, and in a way, Kyle Dubas was not punting on this season, but saying, I think that I can get some assets now to keep us moving in the right direction, as opposed to just ride this out where I don't think it's going to go where we want it to go. I think the team as a whole was disappointed. I think they were miffed. I think Kyle Dubas kind of said that, in his press conferences and the talks that I had with him, that he understood the frustration, he understood the anger. And I think as that kind of fizzled and settled, that turned into motivation. Initially, it was shock. It was anger. There was a shoulder slump type of look to the Penguins when they were playing for a couple games there. But it's pivoted in a hardcore way right now, and it's determination. I think it's fuel to the fire that everyone thought they were done. And listen, I mean, people as close to the team thought they were done, but they've really turned it around and had an incredible run here. And they still control their own destiny as it pertains to their playoff fate. So it's crazy to say that. It's hard for us here as the broadcasters with 4 or 5 games to go to wrap your head around that, considering where things were pointing here for the last little bit. But that is the reality, and everyone's embracing it and excited about this final week of the season.
We only have a minute, but I enjoyed watching the intermission last night of the television broadcast of the Pens and seeing Brian Trottier. We have the heart of our viewers are Western Canadian. He's from Val Marie, Sask. Do you have a quick Brian Trottier story? Just an absolute beauty. 6 Stanley Cups there with him. You must see him around.
Oh. Yeah, I see him all the time. He's great. We just added him this year to our TV broadcast team, and what an asset, as you mentioned, the cups, the experience, the stories, the knowledge. He's got it all, and he really brings it all to the forefront there in the studio for us. But as far as the story, I'm sure you know, but Trotz is a big guitar player, and we had him in the studio a couple, I guess this was like a month and a half ago, and he brought his guitar, and I wasn't sure why he brought it. And he said he just brings it in his car everywhere because sometimes it just feels like playing. And all of a sudden he starts breaking into Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash, pulls out his guitar, sings the whole song start to finish. And, he can do that. He's got that Western Canadian, Central Canadian twang when he gets going. He has the sound, and he grew up in a musical family, and he's been playing the guitar his whole life. So it's just so funny to me that he's this guy that has had so much success, has such a reputation and such a pedigree, but couldn't be more down to earth, and has interests that are not all just hockey. I mean, like music and like his kids and everything like that. So just an awesome human, and we're lucky to have him here on a consistent basis in Pittsburgh.
Just an absolute gem. You're right. Well, we're lucky to have you on, Josh. You're a busy guy. Thanks for this. Good luck in the playoff push.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. I'll talk to you soon.
The radio voice of the Pittsburgh Penguins, Josh Getzoff.